Hey, I'm really looking forward to today's episode because Chris Widener is joining us. Now, Chris has authored 22 books that have been translated in 14 languages and sold millions of copies. And he's been named one of the top speakers in the world. But here's why that's important. It's because the lessons that he teaches are so impactful. I had Emily go into my Amazon account this morning before this episode started going live, and just to give me some numbers. And what she told me was that so far to this day, I've bought 32 copies of his New York Times bestseller, The Angel Inside, and 24 copies of The 12 Pillars, which, by the way, I've got a copy right here on my desk. And I've given them to people on my team because I know that those two books have profound impact on the people who read them. Now, I'm not really quite sure where you and I first met, Chris, but I know we've got several friends in common, right? Two of which are no longer with us. Jim Rohn, who you co-wrote multiple books with, and who I am just so grateful for having been able to share the stage and also share dinner with multiple times when he was still around. And Zig Ziglar. Zig, amazing dude. I used to go down and sit in his office and have these in-depth conversations about the future with. And he asked me to speak to his team several times because I don't know how many people out there know this about Zig, but every morning he would have these talks with his team, right? And they were short, they were sweet, but he was a master at getting everybody on his team focused before they started their day. And that was in Addison, Texas. Actually, I don't know if he was in Addison, but that was when I used to fly down to Addison, which is where you and I both would go down and film our TV show. So I know we have a lot of friends in common, most of whom are in the personal development field, because that's pretty much where you and I spent many of our years in the beginning, right, in personal development. My path kind of led me a bit more into the business area, scaling companies in my own portfolio, investing in and advising a handful of other companies. And your path led you kind of in the leadership field, where you're leading millions of people for your books and your seminars and being a source of knowledge on leadership to so many of the top leaders in the world, right? In religion, politics, business. However, both of us, whether you listen to our podcasts, our videos, pretty much anything, anytime you and I open up our mouths, it's so evident that our background comes from personal development, right? Where we're all about developing ourselves, developing those around us, developing relationships, which is so vital in business and also in our personal lives. But also one thing that I'm highly focused on, and what I really want to touch on with you today, which is developing a lasting impact, right? Which is what your newest book is all about, lasting impact. And so I want to spend time on that, but I also want to like go out into as many areas as we can to deliver some value on success and on personal relationships, because you have such in-depth knowledge on that. So Chris, welcome. I am so grateful that you're spending time with us today.
Thanks for having me on. It's awesome. Really love connecting. And I think we did meet when we were in Addison, both filming our shows. I think that's when we first met, but probably through Kyle Wilson, who was the president of Jim Rohn International. And yeah, way back to like 2004, I think.
I haven't thought about Kyle in a long time.
Yeah. He's doing great now and plugging away. Got a lot of really cool things going on.
Oh yeah. Hey, so I guess let's start with the lasting impact. But I want to start a little bit different. Like, who made who are the top? Like, I hate this question when people ask me, who made the biggest impact on your life? Because it's hard to narrow it down to just one person.
Yeah.
I did a video on this a while back, and I couldn't narrow it down. I think I did 9 people, and that was as much as I could narrow it down to. Many of whom we both have in common, right? Dennis Waitley and Zig and Bob Proctor and all those dudes. But then going all the way down to my father, who had the greatest impact on me. So can you narrow it down to maybe 3 or 4 people who really have shaped your life and made a big lasting impact on you?
Sure. Yeah. The first would have to be my mother. But I will give a caveat to that. My mother, I believe, posthumously, I've diagnosed her as having borderline personality disorder, which meant that she was both the greatest thing in my life and the worst thing in my life. She would, on one hand, I remember once when I was about 10 years old, she stood me in a bookstore and waved her hand and said, if all these people have written books, you could write a book too. And which, you know, jumping forward 45, 50 years. And having done that, But then she would also tell me what a horrible, rotten human being I was. And, people always say, what's the one thing you used to hear your mother say all the time? And I'm going to pull your arm off and beat you with the bloody end of it. So that's, that's one of my mother's famous sayings. But really she had a profound impact on me in regard to believing that I could do anything. They always joke about Jewish mothers, right? That's why so many Jewish people go up to become so successful, doctors, lawyers, whatever. It's because their mother, you could do anything, you can be anything. I love you. You're the best. You're amazing, And so my mother was a little bit like that, but then she just sort of counterbalanced it, make sure I didn't get a big head. The second would be a guy named Sam Samuelson, who was a good old boy from Montana. And he was my youth minister when I was in high school. Now, you got to understand, I never went to church. Like, I never ever went to church. And I was a crazy upbringing, 28 homes, 11 different schools. My dad died when I was 4, shipped off to live with relatives twice, once in the 4th grade, once in the 9th grade, started drugs in the 6th grade, smoked opium for the first time in the 8th grade, made most of my money betting the horses at Long Acres Horse Track, as well as scalping tickets outside Seahawks and Mariners games. Little bit of a glimpse into my upbringing. One day I spent the night at my best pot smoking buddy's house, and it was a Saturday night. And that next morning, his mother barged in at about 8 a.m. and said, "Get up, we're going to Sunday school." And I'm like, "What's Sunday school?" Like, I literally had no clue. Well, it ends up, long story short, there was this good old boy from Helena, Montana, and he was exactly what I needed in 2 regards. Number one, he had size 11 cowboy boots, which is something I needed to experience because I had no male role models growing up. Secondly, he taught me about God and purpose, and that life is bigger than that we were created with a purpose, and life is bigger than we often think, and how can we live that out? And the third, I would say, would be a guy named Dr. Don Douglas, and he was a professor of mine in college. And I went to college like within a year of kind of getting my act together in high school. I became a Christian and started, into that journey summer before my senior year of high school, and then decided to go to get a degree in youth ministry so I could help kids. And so I show up on the doorstep of this college, still very rough around the edges, but he saw some potential in me. And the potential, he put me in charge of the Skid Row team at our college. Everybody in college was required to do some sort of ministry work. Some people did geriatrics and worked with the elderly. Some people worked with, children. I chose Skid Row ministry. So every Saturday night, we spent about 4 or 5 hours down in the streets of Seattle helping homeless people. And I was in charge of that team, scheduling the team. And to give me that kind of investment of belief in me, it spurred me on. The fourth one, and then I'll just do 2 more. The fourth one is a guy named Mike Murphy. Mike was my first job out of college was in Mendham, New Jersey. I was a youth minister at a small little church in Mendham, and I also coached high school basketball. I coached the freshman team with another guy there, and there was a guy in our church whose son was in my youth group, and he at the time was the senior vice president of Mars Candies. He eventually ended up the CEO of Mars Candies. Those of you who don't know Mars, it's just a little $30 billion a year company. And I'll never forget when I left New Jersey to go start out on my own, he started sending me some money to help out. And I called him up after about the second time I got a check from him. And I said, "Hey, I appreciate this, but what's up?" And I'll never forget it. He said, "I believe in you." And I just remember, and I've written about that numerous times in my books because I really realized over the course of my life, it was belief in me that it was like the wind in my sails, right? And then the last person, very similar, was I had gone through a divorce, was really at a low point. I'd lost a ton of money on a big real estate thing, and decided to start getting back to dating, and ended up dating this gal, and on our, when we finally decided, we were going to be exclusive, I said to her, "You're getting me at my lowest point. I just want you to know that you're getting me at my lowest point." And she said, "If this is your lowest point, I can't imagine how high the high points will be."
Oh my God.
And I just was like, this is the girl for me. And we got married June 18th, 2019 in Florence, Italy. And Denise has been my partner, my friend, my supporter. And I guess if I just look at all those people, they were all people who believed in me. And so I think that's one of the biggest ways now that I can make an impact. And I challenge people who've already had success. And I know that people who listen to your podcast, very successful people, never underestimate the power of your belief in somebody. Even just telling them that you believe in them. Because oftentimes as a young man, I looked at somebody who was already successful and I said, well, if they're successful, they must know what success is. They must know what life's about. And they're telling me I've got potential and that they believe in me. I must have something that I don't see. And it's been profoundly powerful, the power of other people's belief in me.
So, so that's a wonderful way. I mean, terrific stories, right? But such a powerful ending to that. Because one of the things that we do inside of our companies is we reward people in each one of my companies for acknowledging others inside the company, to let it, like making sure people inside the companies underneath them know that they believe in them.
Yeah.
Also, when somebody comes in to our company as a new employee, everybody gets a mentor for a minimum of 3 months, sometimes a year, depending on where they are. And they also get a mentor if they go into our leadership training program, to grow in the company. So, and all of that, the essence of everything that we try to instill in people is exactly what you just said, right? Making sure that people know, like, you're going to go from here to here, even though you've never been here before. We believe in you. That's why you're part of this program or inside of this company. Like, you earned your right to be here, and you may not even know that yet, but you earned your right for the next level.
Yeah.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, and there was a book that I read a long time ago called "The Power of Praising People," and it's a whole book about what happens when you praise other people. And I read another book called The Blessing, which I think every parent should read. It's called The Blessing, and it's about how children look to their parents, and particularly their father, for this blessing, to know that they are loved, to know that they're approved of, and how that happens in children's lives, and it affects them when they grow up and their belief in themselves.
Yeah. Hey, I want to go back to, the people who you consider, I don't know if you consider a mentor, people who have made a lasting impact on you. One of the people who I mentioned earlier, when I was just introing you, was Dennis Waitley. I did this video where I talked about a bunch of my mentors, and what was funny as I was brainstorming that was that I don't know that any of these people actually mentored me with what they said. All of them mentored me by what they were doing in their own lives and what I was noticing they were doing. Like, the biggest lessons that I learned from most of the people in my life, which I think the reason why I'm saying this is not just because I want to say what's happened in my life, but it's something that I carry forward. And I think that it's important for everybody to carry forward in the way they project, because leading by example is so important. Dennis, like, I remember Dennis and I were on stage. I forget where it was. I believe it was in Texas. I forget the event that we were speaking at, but we were talking. It might've been one of Vic's events. Remember Vic Johnson?
Vic Johnson, yeah, still in touch with Vic.
What's that?
I'm still in touch with Vic, yeah.
Oh, please tell him I said hello next time. He was such an amazing dude. Him and his wife, Lisa, tremendous people.
Yeah.
So Dennis, I remember after we were done, we were in the area where everybody just wanted to hang out and talk with us, outside the seminar room. He was crowded with people. I was crowded with people. He came over and he wanted to say something to me. And when we were talking, people were coming up to take a picture with him or coming up to take a picture with me, and he would not take his eyes off of me. Like, everything, like when I was talking, he was mono-focused on me the entire time. Yeah. And then I watched him every once in a while he was talking to other people, and everybody was trying to interrupt him. And the person that he was speaking to, he never lost contact with the entire time. And I sat there thinking, wow, like that's, and I was like, somebody would come up and I would acknowledge them, and then I would keep talking to the person, but he wouldn't even, he just stayed so focused. And I thought that is such a powerful way to connect with people.
Well, my favorite story about Dennis, first time I ever met him, it was summer of 2002, and I was going to put on a big conference in the fall of 2002, and so I was friends with Kevin Small, who was the president of John Maxwell's company. Yep. And Kevin said, why don't you come down here and watch us do our maximum impact seminar and kind of see how it's done. You can just hang out all weekend. And I said, well, put me to work. And he said, oh, really? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, you're in charge of Dennis Waitley for the weekend. So I was in 2002. I was already 14 years into my speaking business, but I was like, okay, sure. And I brought my son with me. And so my son was born in 91. This is 2002. So he was 11 years old. And I made him read Seeds of Greatness before we went.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, look, the guy that we're going to go spend the weekend with wrote this book called Seeds of Greatness. I want you to, read it and know it. So I'll never forget, we're driving Dennis to the speech that day. And Christopher is just peppering him with questions about the book. And we pulled up to the front of the hotel, right in the valet stand. And Christopher says, and what about, XYZ. And I said, Christopher, Mr. Waitley has to go and he has to go give this speech. And then I'll never forget it. He said, no, I want to answer all these questions. So he sat there for a few more minutes answering an 11-year-old's questions about his book, Seeds of Greatness, while there were people. Now, obviously, we weren't dropping him off 2 minutes before the event, right? Yeah. But he had plenty of time. But just the fact of how many people would have actually sat there and answered an 11-year-old boy's questions, as opposed to saying, you know what, I'll get back to you on that, or maybe we can talk later, or, I've got more important things to do. And that's the way Dennis always was. I've always found him to be that way.
I found a lot of the people inside of our circle in personal development are similar to that. Yeah. Not nearly as laser focused as Dennis, but I know Bob Proctor, who is a good friend, was a wonderful mentor of mine when I was first getting started. And we've worked together several times in different capacities throughout the years. He has always, like, he and I are text back and forth a minimum of a couple times a year now. In the beginning, we were texting back and forth far more than that. Like, he consistently takes time out to just connect. Yeah. And that was even before he knew who the heck I was. When, like, I was in one of his programs, I forget what it was. I think it was called the CC program years ago when I was struggling in my very first company. And as part of that program, he gave his email address out, and I didn't expect anybody to get back in touch with me when I would email. I emailed him and he would personally reply to me. So anybody inside that program, he literally took time to reply to, and it's amazing. So I've always tried to bring that into anything that I've ever done, where when somebody is part of anything that I do, even if it's on social media, I try to log in on a regular basis. And when I can, obviously I've got, a handful of companies, got 11 companies inside my portfolio. So it is a little bit daunting to then break away and go into social media, but I do still do that a couple times a week. And I reply to people because I want them to know that there's a face at the back of this brand.
Yeah. Well, I learned that from Mike Murphy at Mars. He told me one time that he never had, no one at Mars had an admin who answered their phone for them. Wow. Everybody answered their own phone. And so it's funny, I still answer my own phone, and people will call and I'll say, hello. And they're like, is this Chris? And I'm like, yeah, this is Chris. And they're like, oh, wow, I never expected you to answer the phone. And I just love that response, right? Because you expect people to be one way and then they're not. And I learned that from Mike. I don't know that it's right or wrong, black or white on whether or not you should or shouldn't. But I always thought that was such a cool thing that he answered his own phone, even when he was CEO of a $30 billion a year company.
That's crazy.
And everybody had access. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was trying to distill down what lasting impact means. And I've got some things that are, I've got like 5 principles in my life, the things that I believe are the basis for happiness in my life. And also, as I look at them, it's all about developing a lasting impact also, right? I tell people all the time, life is all about developing experiences for me, memories, growing something that I'm proud of, developing a legacy, and helping others to achieve in life. Like, that's what makes me happy, and that's what juices and jazzes me. But I tried to kind of distill it down more specifically as it relates to developing a lasting impact. And what I came up with was knowing what you want to be remembered for, right? So that you could reverse engineer, whatever that is. And knowing the impact that you want to have on people? Like, what do you want to be remembered for? What is it that, what kind of change or what kind of influence do I want to have on people? Like what we're talking about with some of our past mentors, and then leading by example.
Yeah.
So if you were to break it down and really make it very, very simplistic, I know there's so much detail in your books. And by the way, I want you to answer that, but I want to tell people about your books for a second. I have very few authors in my life who I truly love the way they write. I mean, I love the ability to read something that gets stuck in the book, as opposed to reading. I mean, I read a lot of business books, but I read a lot of books outside of business as well. It's so rare that you get somebody who actually gets you stuck in the book. 12 Pillars, I think, is one of my favorite books out there. Angel Inside. The reason why I don't have a copy of Angel Inside right now on my desk is because my copy I lent to my father.
Oh,
Because I just thought it would be profound to share that with him. He, as a matter of fact, this past weekend, I went to his house. It had his 90th birthday this weekend on Saturday.
That's awesome.
Amazing guy. He has, made such an impact on me in my life. And I shared that book with him. I forget, it was a year ago. I still haven't gotten it back. So maybe I should pick that up at some point.
Yeah,
Anyway.
no, I love that book. That's my favorite book I've ever written. Lasting Impact is my first nonfiction book. Most of my books are stories, obviously parables and stories. You'd have to go before Angel Inside, 2003, to find a book nonfiction that I've written. And so I wrote this way. Oh yeah. Oh boy.
That's nonfiction.
Well, yeah. Well, I got sued for that because it says.
All right, I won't show that. Well, maybe we should cut that out.
Fine. That's how long ago you bought. No, parenthetically here, I did this audio program called Secrets of Influence, and out of the blue, after 2 years, Kyle and I get a cease and desist from like a 75-year-old woman who's never used the trademark, and she demanded like $250,000.
Wow.
Like, what? That's why we changed it to Winning with Influence. And then the book was called The Art of Influence. But no, that was crazy. But no, Lasting Impact is nonfiction. And to your question, how do you do that? I think it's really simple. You said make it as simple as possible. It's as simple as possible. Begin with the end in mind, which is the old 7 Habits, Highly Effective People, one of them. And ask yourself, what do I want my legacy to be? Do I want to be known for being loving? Then love people today. Do you want to be known as being generous? Then be generous today. Do you want to be known for being physically fit? Then go get fit today. Go work out today. Like whatever you want to be known for, you have to start doing it today, because your short-term task multiplied by time equal your long-term accomplishments, right? And so, I've always thought if I was a cartoonist, I always wanted to do a cartoon of a man sitting in an easy chair, and he's reading a book, and his son is standing next to him going, "Dad, can we please go out and play baseball?" And he's got a glove and a ball in his hand. And his dad says, "No, son, I'm learning how to be a good father." And the title of the book is How to Be a Good Father, right? And I always just thought that would be, because there's so many people like that. Like, I'm going to read a book about how to be a good father. No, put the book down and go play catch with your kid. That's how to be a good father. So I just think that whatever you want to be known for, or what you want to be your lasting impact, start doing it today. Because over the course of whether you have a year left in your life or 30 years left in your life, that's going to add up and become that legacy.
So you and I are both entrepreneurs. How do you want to be? What do you want to be known for? And by the way, I'm asking you that as an entrepreneur, right? So you're speaking to our audience right now who are entrepreneurs. But I'm not asking you how you want to be known in your company.
Right.
I'm asking you in general, like, give me it all. What are you working for to be known as?
I just want to be known for having made people's lives better, because we all just pass through this world. I mean, think about it, just a giant revolving door, right? And I mean, giant, the entire world's coming in, and some of them go around 30 or 40 times and then they exit. And now you go in, and now you're always in this revolving door with a bunch of people as the world spins around, but you've got people spinning out all the time. And so I might get 3 laps around and then out. And those 3 laps, I want to make sure that everybody that was on that with me is better. want to challenge them. Sometimes you need to get in people's face in order to make their life better. I want to encourage them. Sometimes you just need to tell them it's going to be okay and to keep plugging away. And, through my writing, the books, I think that that's a general theme, is that people can choose what they want to do. They can be what they want to be. They can live the kind of life they want to live. And I'm there to sort of root them on, just like I had a lot of people rooting me on. My start was not a good start in life. And I could have ended up in some very different circumstances. And so that's what I really want is I want people to say, he made my life better. 10 years after I'm dead, I want somebody to go, oh, I just picked up this book and, Angel Inside. So, oh, I read that book 20 years ago, changed my life. I love that guy. That's what I want to be remembered as.
Yeah, well, I think you've got that obviously in many of the people inside of my companies, because you've got at least 2 of your books.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh my God. I appreciate it far more, trust me, in the changes that
I'm trying to get The Angel Inside done as a movie. I've got a guy who's really interested. He has been for a long time. And then he emailed me like 3 weeks before COVID hit. And he said, I've just been hired to be the president of a Japanese film company here in Beverly Hills. And I want my first project to be The Angel Inside. And then bam, everything hit. They shut down. And so we're just picking up steam again with him.
Oh yeah. Listen, everything is coming back.
Yeah.
And that is amazingly needed after COVID. So I think that'll be a wonderful way for him to get his foot in the door and push forward. Yeah. Hey, as an entrepreneur, I have always tried to put my kids first, but also I put them first in a way that, I try to instill in them that their dad has a responsibility to all those who work for me and to all of our customers or clients. I want them to understand that the same values we live by as a family are the same values that we live by as a company. So as an entrepreneur, how did you handle fatherhood? Because I know your kids are a little bit older now. So what I'd love for you to speak about, how as a father, you didn't lose that connection with your kids while you grew your businesses.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I did is I limited my schedule. I know a lot of speakers that'll do 150, 200 days a year on the road. And I think the most speeches I ever did in a year was 70. And I didn't stay very long in those places when I went, because 70, let's call it a day and a half for each one, right? So I'm already on the road over 100 days a year. If I'd have stayed an extra day to see the sights in every one of those places, I'd have been 180 days a year on the road, 6 months a year on the road. And I just didn't want to do it. I wanted to be at home and be involved in my kids and coach their sports. And I think there's sort of two sides of the pendulum, neither of which is right. Raise yourself, I'm going to go build my empire. That's one side of the pendulum. And the other side of the pendulum is everything has to revolve around my children, and the children are the center of my universe. And I think that we need to find a balance, because as you mentioned, you're being a good father by showing your children what it means to be a good worker, a good boss, a good employer. And that is just as much a part of their character development and their life development as sitting there reading them a book. And so I think that there's a balance. There's times we're with them, and when we're with them, we're fully present. And then there's times where we're telling them there's an important part of life. And I would say that includes taking their mother out for dinner. We're getting a babysitter. We don't want to stay home with a babysitter. Too bad. Your mom's important to me, and we're going out by ourselves. Because when you turn 21, you're out of the house, and it's going to be your mother and me. So we need to make this, keep going, right? And I think the other is your friends. There needs to be poker nights and bowling nights and things like that, because I think we need to show our children that it's good to go and be with our guy friends. And if you're a gal, to go, if you're women, I'm sure there's women listening too. Tell your husbands and your kids, it's time for some mom time. I'm going with my sisters or my girlfriends, and we're going to go off to a spa weekend for 3 or 4 days. Hubby, you're in charge of taking care of the kids, because that says relationships are important, and it teaches your children to have friendships. And so I think we need to live our life and just demonstrate what a well-balanced life looks like.
Yeah, so leading by example, it's tremendous. Yeah. So I love that last part where friends, you're with friends.
Yeah.
I always try to make it so that the friends would always come over.
Yeah. I always hosted poker night at my house.
Yeah. Well, I did it very specifically because I wanted them to grow up and want their friends to always come over to their place.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
So important because when friends are coming over here, like when they come over to our house, I could meet their friends and
Yeah.
I could and I could throw the right food in front of them and there could be some values inside the house that everybody's living by, as opposed to my kids always leaving the house to go to somebody else's house.
Yeah.
I didn't want that to be the case. So I tried to live by example with that. But also, I don't know that there is a lesson for everybody in this, but you talked about traveling around and speaking. I was doing at one point 4 to 7 gigs a month, and it was and all over the globe, right? These weren't like going to California or going to
Right.
Connecticut. It was going to Australia, New Zealand, Asia, going everywhere. So it was a day there, a day back, that kind of stuff. And I never once stayed with all the other speakers to travel around. I've been to literally around the globe dozens of times, amazingly beautiful places. Everybody else who was speaking at any event that I was speaking at always said, hey, come and see the Blue Forest with us. Come, you can't go to Malaysia without going to the Twin Towers. Bob used to tell me all the time, the Malaysian people are wonderful. You have to go here, 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 here. But I never, ever traveled because I always, when I was done on stage, I'd get the soonest flight back and I'd be back with my kids.
I did Seattle to Singapore, gave a speech, and back to my front door in Seattle in 72 hours once.
Oh my God.
And then I spent like 4 days in bed because I
I was
didn't
just going
know
to
how
say, you
bad
must
that
have
was
been
going to wipe me
comatose.
out.
Yeah. But you're in the same house as with your kids. So that's important that they saw that.
Yeah.
So I remember I stopped all that when Thanksgiving Day happened one year, and I was sitting at the table with my family, and the car pulled up to my front door as I was shoveling turkey into my mouth for Thanksgiving dinner to get out to go to Asia, to get onto a plane to go to Asia for an event, and it was a big important event. As a family, we talked about it beforehand to make sure that everybody understood, and we all voted on, should Daddy take this event or should I not? I went out, and from the airport lounge, I was sitting there, and I texted to the house and I said, "This is my last one. Like, I'm not doing this again."
Yeah.
Kids are too old now. They realize Daddy's out of the house. It takes them a day to warm up to me when I get back. This is not what this model was built for. I'm done. So I will still, and at that point, instead of doing 4 to 7 gigs a month, I average 4 to 5 a year now. So
Yeah.
not quite that amount during COVID. Now it's all.
Yeah, right, yeah, exactly, exactly. I'll tell you a story about another reason you invite your friends over. If you have successful friends, I'll tell you an interesting story happened to my son. He was applying for a job at a 300-store mattress company. He was 21 years old. He was going to go sell mattresses. And he walks in, and for some reason, the owner of the company was in town that day. So he said, I want to sit in on the interviews. So they had the Washington state manager, the owner of the company, and then the regional manager. And they were asking him all these questions. And at the end, they said, Christopher, if you hit 50% of your goals, you'll make $50,000 a year. If you make 80% of your goals, you make $80,000 a year. If you hit 100% of your goals, you make $100,000 a year. If you do 120% of your goals, you make $120,000 a year. Which one do you see yourself as? And the CEO asked him this question. The guy owns 300 stores. Well, he finally sold them to Mattress Firm. But he asked Christopher that question, and Christopher laughed at him. And the guy was offended. And Christopher could tell that he was offended. And Christopher went, oh, is that a serious question? And the CEO goes, yeah, it's a serious question. And he goes, oh, 120% to goal. And then he leaned forward and he goes, does anybody answer anything other than that? And the CEO did that exact same laugh. He laughed. And at the end of the interview, they said, okay, we'll let you know in 2 weeks. Well, 10 minutes later, he's driving down the road. He gets a phone call.
Yeah.
It was the regional manager. He said, the owner of the company loved your answer so much, you're hired. He went on to become the number one salesman in that company. Then they made him a store manager. He was like the number 2 store manager in the company. And he got home and he said, Dad, why would anybody answer anything other than that? And I told him, I said, you're pretty lucky that you've grown up in an affluent home where my friends, and I've always had a life goal to be the poorest person in my friend group. I want to be the dumbest guy in my friend group and the poorest guy in my friend group, because then it means I'm hanging around with better people, right? And I said, you've my friends are CEOs of professional baseball teams and guys that ran for governor and wildly successful real estate investors. And I said, so your world was always at a higher level. Because when my friends would come over, they'd say, oh, I just bought a new apartment complex for $30 million. Or, oh, I just, did whatever. And I said, there are some people that will go in to apply for that job who literally do not know anyone who makes $75,000 a year.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another thing we can do by surrounding our children with really good people, by inviting them into our home so our children can see them and interact with them. And it raises our children to a higher level and it raises their mindset to a higher level.
Hey, I heard, I got to make a wide right turn here. Same exact subject that you're talking about right now, but a different child. I heard you tell a story one time.
I already know what story you're going to ask about. Go ahead.
It's the barista story.
Yeah, it's my daughter, Hannah.
You have to tell it, man.
So Hannah was 14, and Hannah now lives in she lives in Okinawa with her Navy husband, and she's always had this business acumen, and I always tried to encourage it in her, and she just decided she didn't want to go into business or anything like that. She's a mom, 2 great kids, but when she was 14 years old, she got a job as a barista.
Yeah.
And at a little, I think they owned 2 stores. It wasn't a Starbucks or anything like that, and she, she would come home and I think they made $8 an hour or something like that. So she'd work 4 or 5 hours and she'd come home and at first she had like $20 tips, something like that. Then we'd go to $40 a day in tips. And eventually it was like $75 a day in tips. And so I finally just called her into my office and I'm like, you're just selling coffee up there, right? And she said, oh yeah, Dad, I finally figured people out. I'm like, oh, well, it took you to 14, which is a little slow, but all right, Dalai Lama, tell me, what's the secret to life? And she said, people love to talk about themselves. And I'm like, I don't get it. Like, how does that equate to, tripling your tips in 3 months? And she said, well, I used to not talk to anybody at all when they would order their coffee. I just make their coffee and hand it to them. And she said, then I realized they like to talk about themselves. So all I do now for 2 or 3 minutes while I'm making their latte is just ask them questions about themselves. I see you come in here all the time. Where do you work? What kind of college degree did you have to have? How long have you worked there? What do you do on a day-to-day basis? I see you're wearing a wedding ring. Are you married? What's your wife do? Well, where did she go to college? What about your kids, Tony and Susie, and blah blah blah. And how was Tony's t-ball game? How was Susie's gymnastics event? And she said, now it used to be they'd hand me the money, I'd give them the change, and some of the change went in the tip jar. But now they give me their money, I give them the change, and all of the money goes in the tip jar. And so she really realized that at a psychologically subconscious level, people tripled the amount of money they tipped her when she started asking them questions. And it always reminds me of the old, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. What's the sweetest sound on anybody's ear? It's their own name. Well, similarly, what's people's most important topic? It's themselves. And Hannah just gave them a chance to talk about themselves. And literally at a subconscious level, people tipped 3 times as much when she started doing that.
Amazing. Yeah. So it's amazing what we learn from our children.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, she's a really gregarious gal and has always done well.
That's amazing. Hey, so I want to go into 3 topics, all of which you are like deeply rooted in. Success, influence, and legacy, right? So, and I think this is all. I think this is the way an entrepreneur matures, right? We go into business mostly and we're looking, and our definition of success is what? The amount of sales we can make. And then it grows and it matures and it goes into how many people can we touch and with our business or with our message or with our brand or whatever. And then what kind of a change can we make? So success, I want to talk about. Influence, how we influence in a positive way the people, our employees, our vendors, our independent contractors, our partners. How do we live by example, right? One guy that we know summed it up in one sentence, which I live by, and I have been saying. I stole from him. I give him credit every single time, but Bob Proctor says, "Leave people with the impression of increase." And I believe that is the most important thing that you can do in business always.
Yeah.
But success, influence, and then what do I do? Like, what am I doing this for? What am I building as a reputation, in wealth, in everything, right? So that's where a lot of people in their 50s and 60s are with business, when they're starting out and they got all the extra testosterone, whether they're a man or a woman. That's a good analogy. I'm putting my head down. I push through every single obstacle, right? So I'm just gonna leave it to you.
Yeah. So success, let's just go through all three. Success, there's two things that I've been talking a lot about, and they're included in my new book, and there's great stories about it as well. I think people who become successful, um, there's two key things I've been focusing in on a lot in the last year in particular. But the first is opportunities. Being prepared to take advantage of opportunities. And I'll tell you an interesting story about a kid named Keaton Slovis. And those of you who are college football fans, you know the name Keaton Slovis. Keaton was the high school quarterback of the football team where my daughters went to school here in Scottsdale. And he had signed a deal to go to USC on a full ride before his junior year of college. So I watched him play, or of high school. I watched him play his junior year, senior year, and then he went off to college. And he came in fourth string quarterback at USC. And by the end of spring practice, he was second string quarterback. And on the first game of the 2019 year, the starting quarterback snapped his ACL. And out walks onto the field a true freshman, non-redshirt, who'd never taken a snap in college yet. And he walks out onto the field. Long story short, he went on to break almost every USC record for freshman quarterbacks. He broke numerous records for all quarterbacks. He's the only USC quarterback to ever throw over 500 yards in a game, 295 yards in a quarter, 4 touchdowns in a quarter. He was named freshman Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year. And basically just went on. And in the middle of his run-up, like the third or fourth game that he was playing, when it was patently obvious that this new superstar had stepped onto the field, a reporter asked him, was it hard for you or difficult for you to make the transition from high school to college? And he said, no, actually, college is a lot easier than high school. And, you know, the sports reporters like, oh, who's this arrogant young guy, blah, blah, blah. And Keaton is he's a humble kid. He reminds me actually a lot of Peyton Manning. We've known him for years. He's been to the house for barbecues. He's a good kid. And he realized, oh, I think this guy took it wrong. So he says, he looks at the guy and he says, do you know who my high school quarterback coach was? And the guy says, no, who? And he says, Kurt Warner. Kurt Warner, Hall of Fame NFL quarterback, Super Bowl winning champion, Super Bowl MVP champion, was the quarterback coach, not the head coach, quarterback coach, because his son had been at Desert Mountain earlier. And when his son graduated, he saw some potential in Keaton, so he stuck around for 2 more years. And so Keaton said, I was running a pro-style offense in high school. So it was a step back. And I think the lesson is really amazing because Keaton was a 3-star recruit. And the other guys on that football team, the quarterbacks, were all 5-star recruits. But the one thing Keaton had that those 5-star recruits didn't have was when he walked to the line of scrimmage, he saw everything. It's like the Matrix, right? It's like all the things just disappeared for him because he'd already been doing it for 2 or 3 years. So he was prepared. So the story is really less about Keaton and more about Kurt and how Kurt prepared him to just see things at a whole nother level that was almost like stepping back in time instead of stepping forward. So I love that story about people who are successful have to be prepared. When the coach says, put your helmet on, this guy's out, you got to be able to get in the game. So when you're presented with an opportunity for an investment or a new market or any of these kinds of things, are you already prepared? Not to get prepared when the opportunity arrives, but to be prepared when the opportunity arrives. And I think the other thing that I'm really talking a lot about now because of all the circumstances in the world, it's also another football analogy. So if you like football, you'll like this one too. But I'm really good friends with a guy named Andre Wadsworth. And those of you who are NFL fans, you might remember the name Andre Wadsworth. He graduated in Florida high school, small little Christian college or Christian high school, but he was big. So he went to Florida State and University of Florida. And he said, I want a scholarship. And they said, yeah, you're not good enough. You went to a small high school, but I'll let you walk on. So Bobby Bowden let him walk on. And again, long story short, he went from walking on to becoming the third player drafted in the NFL draft. At his combine, when he worked out for the pros, Andre was 6'5", 265, ran a 4.65 40, and the most impressive stat was he had a 39-inch vertical jump. He was like being hit by a steaming locomotive. And so the first pick was Peyton Manning. Second pick was Ryan Leaf of Washington State. And the third pick was Andre Wadsworth. Long story short, Andre had 15 knee surgeries in the first 3 years of pro football and washed out. So the book and the title in my chapter of my book is called Plot Twist: What to Do When What You Thought Was Going to Happen Doesn't Happen. And so Andre was a very strong Christian. He said, well, I'm going to start a Bible study for professional athletes. Well, within a couple of years, he had 150 of all the Phoenix professional athletes, the football players, baseball players, hockey players, basketball players. He had like 150 players and their families all coming to this little Bible study that he set up. So he says, well, maybe we should start a church. So they started a church. Well, Andre's not a preacher. So they hired a preacher. And Andre's like the associate, executive pastor. Again, long story short, it is now one of the 10 fastest growing churches in America. And the name of the church is Impact Church, which I always thought was cool with the name of the lasting impact. So being able to handle plot twists, and the last year has shown a lot of plot twists. You're a restaurant owner, plot twist. Now you can only have 25% of the people.
Right.
You've got a big office with 400 people in it, plot twist. Now they're all working from home. How do you handle the plot twists in life? Because those are the things. Not being prepared for opportunity will stop you in place, and not being able to make that plot twist and make the changes will leave you stranded. So I think that those are two really big ones that I think people are going to have to really be thinking a lot about now as they navigate success, because there's going to be tremendous opportunities. And there's going to be tremendous plot twists. My son is a good example. He owns a digital giving company for churches. I think he's processing about $600,000 a month now. It's a little startup that he did. Well, he quadrupled the amount that he was processing when COVID hit. It was a plot twist that presented an opportunity. And so now all of a sudden churches don't have people coming in to donate. So the churches still have to pay for the mortgage and pay for the lights and pay for the staff salaries. So there was this big shift, and he was prepared for it with his technology and quadrupled the amount of money that he was processing. So I think we just always have to be aware of what the opportunities are, especially those presented by these big plot twists.
Hey, I'm going to interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
I know you've got more to talk about when we go to influence and legacy, but I think it's important that we take just a step back and we talk about your son for a second, because wonderful businessman, right, gets wherever he believes he gets that. The foundation of that, it comes from his father, right? So it was because you were leading from example. Now he's got this amazing thing. And now with this plot twist that he went through right now, he's looking for funding for his company, right? And he went out there. He's got some amazing mentors, which you helped to hook him up with. Yeah. And he's got a tremendous deck for investing. What is he looking for right now? How much is he looking for?
Minimum of 500. 2 million would be about the sweet spot for about 25% of the company. Fully profitable. He's in the money. And he's kind of like a cigarette racer, just sitting there in the water. He needs the fuel, right? If we refuel that engine, he can get to blowing and going again. So, but they're positive cash flow after just 2 years, and doing a great job.
So a company, it's rare that a company comes to us in our venture capital firm who is already highly profitable. Like you've told me about his profit. He's not just a couple bucks profit. He's doing well. And he's got a track record of growth. Yeah. And then COVID hit and a hockey sticked up, right? He's not great he's not a perfect fit for our venture capital firm because we would want to invest even more money in there. And I don't know that would be good for him right now, but for anybody who, who wants to go in for $500 to $2 million, this is tremendous, right? Yeah. It is the wet dream of most investors.
Well, and listen to this. I told you before we got started, the industry leader who he used to be the number one salesman for, then he took his year off for his non-compete and started the company. The industry leader has 3% market share. So there's 300,000 churches in America. They have 9,000 churches. That's 3% market share. They went public on the Australian exchange and they are worth $1.5 billion with 3% market share. That's the valuation that's being placed on these digital giving tools, because currently out of the $125 billion that are donated to churches in America every year, 88% is still done by check and cash. Yeah. So there's 88% of that market, which is about $100 billion still waiting to be captured.
My God.
It's an insanely huge market that I think even people who have no interest in spirituality or anything are like, I like money, so maybe this is the way to go.
Yeah, I would like, this is totally off topic, but there's no way I could talk about investing without saying something about this.
Yeah.
Somewhere after this podcast, we're gonna have to talk about sharing that deck so that I could share it with some of the guys on my board. But okay, so let's keep going. Influence and legacy.
So influence, to me, it's the ability to change other people's thoughts, beliefs, and actions. And we're all influencing people. It's just a matter of whether we're influencing them poorly or influencing them effectively. And in my speeches and in the book, The Art of Influence, I really talk about 4 different things: the ability to create trust, respect, admiration, and loyalty. How do you get trust, respect, admiration, and loyalty from people you lead and sell to? Trust comes from integrity. We always have to be looking at ourselves and how well we're living our lives. Are we operating out of a single set of morals, ethics, and values that allows people to trust us? Admiration comes from being optimistic because tough times are going to hit, and optimistic leaders pull people through those tough times. And people admire them. We always see people going through really tough times and they still seem to have a great attitude. And what does it instill in us? Admiration for them. I remember I had a friend of mine, his wife got cancer and she made it through, thankfully, but she ended up having to, get rid of all her hair. She lost all her hair. And she says one day, the best thing about cancer? I said, is there a good thing about cancer? She goes, I get to wear different wigs every single day. I'm a brunette one day. I'm a redhead one day. I'm a blonde one day. I got long hair one day, curly hair one day, short hair one day. I love it. And I'm like, how do you get to be like that? How do you get to be so positive that you can? It's like the little girl who sees a big pile of horse manure and she's dancing around, jumping around at her birthday party. And they're like, why are you dancing around the horse manure? And she says, there's got to be a pony here somewhere, right? So I mean, he's like looking for the pony. And I think that really is true. We really develop admiration from people when we're optimistic leaders. The third one, service. We gain loyalty from people by serving them, by placing their interests more important than our own. I always love Zig Ziglar's. In fact, when you said a quote earlier on, you quoted Bob Proctor. I thought maybe you were going to quote Zig's most famous quote, that quote that says, you can have anything you want in life if you just help other people get what they want out of life. And so I think that's important to gain loyalty. And then the last one is respect. How do you gain people's respect? You gain people's respect through excellence, by being the absolute best that you can, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, relationally, financially. How do you raise that level to a standard of excellence so that people say, I want to do business with that guy? I want to know that woman and what makes her tick. How do you live your life in that way to gain that trust, respect, admiration, and loyalty? When they view you in that way, then you're able to say things and they listen. As far as excellence, if you think about excellence, right? Who do you go to when you want someone to influence you? If you want to learn how to have a good marriage, you don't go to the couple that's fighting all the time. You go to the couple that's been married for 40 years and say, how'd you make it? When you want financial advice, you don't go to the guy at the end of the off-ramp holding a cardboard sign that says, we'll work for food, and ask him what his stock tips are. You go to your rich uncle who owns a bunch of apartment complexes. And, we respect people who excel at things, and we ask them to influence us. So why wouldn't it be the same, going the other direction? So raising your standards of excellence is number one, to be able to get that integrity, the attitude, the service, the excellence, and people open themselves up to people like that.
Yeah. So I want to just add one more thing to your first point, which was trust, right?
Yeah.
And this point comes up a tremendous amount when I'm dealing with companies. We were in negotiations to purchase a company. I guess this was maybe 4 years ago. And the guy kept saying what his values were, and and but this negotiation went on for, I think it was like 8.5 months or something like that. And when I'm negotiating with somebody for the acquisition of their company, I want to break bread with them. I want to, sit down. I want to eat with them. I want to meet them. I want to go tour through their company. I want to see how people inside their company react to them. I want to do this kind of stuff over and over again. And what I'm looking for is this consistency. And it was so evident in that particular meeting. And as you were going through these steps, this story kept popping into my head, because I think you're right. People who live by values, you begin to trust people when you know their values. The challenge is he was never consistent. And I think when you're inconsistent, it's not a value. Like, you could have a set of 5, 8 values, and maybe if you value them every once in a while, that's one thing. But when people can trust you, when they can predict what you're going to do or say based on your values. Like,
Exactly.
I know John would never, whatever, he would never do blank. So I know how he's going to react in this situation, this situation, and this situation, because I know
Yeah,
value.
that is so good, because that's the point of operating out of a single set of morals, ethics, and values, right? If you have 2 sets, one for this circumstance, one for this circumstance, now people have to say which morality is going to come from, which values is he going to come from. When you only have one set of values where you tell the truth all the time, they know that when you speak, you're telling them the truth. Right? It's so important to take the guesswork. You're the first person that's ever said anything along those lines. I say it all the time, and you're so true, that so much about trust is just not having to have guesswork.
Yeah, and you know what? Let's take that one step further, because it's trust in yourself as well. To be able
Sure.
to have a set of values that you could now, it makes it easy for you to make decisions, right? Do I do blank, or do I do it blank? Well, you know what? My company could scale. I know I could get my company to scale another 35% over the course of the next blank number of months if I were to turn a blind eye and allow my marketing team to just say whatever they want to say in their marketing. But that's not the way our companies are built. That's not the way I want my team to see us, or my prospects to see us, or my customers to see us. So that's not what I want to think about when I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with something racing in my head, thinking, "Oh, was that a good decision or not?" No. When I have values, it makes it very easy for myself to make decisions.
Yeah.
And so we try to hire people inside of our organizations who understand our values and who have some kind of synergistic values in their lives, so that I know what I could expect from them when times get tough, not just when times are good. They know what they could expect from us. And during our interview process, which is at minimum of 3 interviews long for anybody in our company, we'll ask them questions. We'll put them in different situations just to see if their values align with the company values.
Yeah.
You can see my Italian coming out. I'm talking with my hands now. So, okay. So last is legacy.
I think legacy goes back to what I said earlier. Whatever you want your legacy to be, just do it today. I mean, it really comes down to
By
the legacy. The legacy is really, I mean, you're dead and in a box, right? The legacy determines whether or not you have legacy is the memories and the thoughts of the other people.
right.
And if you never took your kid fishing or to a basketball game or something, he won't or she won't have those memories. Thus, you will not have that legacy. So it's crafting the things that people will remember you for. That's the legacy. What do they remember about you?
Right. Which brings us into developing a lasting impact. So and I want to ask you some final thoughts, but before we do, I want to just let people know where to get your book, Lasting Impact, because
Yeah,
it is.
Amazon. Easy enough. Go to Amazon or just Google it and go to wherever you buy your books.
Okay, so Google Chris Widener
Yeah.
or
Amazon
Google
has it.
Lasting Impact, either
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
You come up all over the place. Lasting Impact, you Google that, comes up all over the place.
Yeah.
So, and grab it at Amazon. So,
Yep.
final thoughts.
On lasting impact.
Final thoughts on anything that we talked about today that you believe you'd like to emphasize, or anything that you believe we missed today that you just want to share.
I just think we need to be more aware of who we are each and every day and what that adds up to. So often we're the tyranny of the urgent, right? It's whatever is hottest on our plate that day. It's the person screaming on the phone that they need us right now. It's the tyranny of the urgent. Yeah. And we need to. It's why one of my number one books that I refer to my coaching clients is First Things First by Stephen Covey. I refer First Things First 10 times more than I refer 7 Habits. Because First Things First, if you read the book, it's got the quadrants, right? Yep. You've got this combination of important and urgent or not urgent. And so non-important, non-urgent is like, or the least, right? Or then you got urgent, but where you want to spend your time is in the important things that are not urgent. And the more you work on getting ahead of the game, now you can just sort of flow, so you can focus on the important things that are not urgent. I've been doing that since I was in college. In 4 years of college, never pulled an all-nighter. Because what I did was, at the beginning of the semester, I spent the first 2 weeks doing nothing but all of my homework assignments, all of my reading assignments. And then throughout the rest of the semester, when I'd show up at class and they'd say assignment number 14 is due, I'd open my 3-ring binder and drop it on their desk. It was done. And so the last 2 weeks I could spend studying. I didn't have to wait till the last night because I'm still doing my term papers, still doing my stuff. That was done 8 weeks ago. So now I could focus on that and never had to pull an all-nighter for tests or anything like that. I think that was focusing on the important things and keeping myself out of that urgency that, and of course the ironic thing is, you spend all night for 2 or 3 nights, then you go take the test and you perform poorly anyway because you've had no sleep. So,
hey, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think you started your foray into developing yourself years before I did. I started after college. You started before. Obviously, it had a massive impact on how you trained yourself and how you took on challenges. I learned the hard way. I went through college doing exactly what you said not to do.
I stayed up all night and fraternity parties and all that.
And then what I did, which was instrumental, and I know I've heard a lot of personal development speakers talk about this, but I had not heard about it at the time. But I started developing myself after college. Like, I started studying myself and started studying behaviors and started studying, why was this kind of stuff happening? And then I worked on myself, which was wonderful. And I'm so grateful. I don't know what it was that made me focus on that, but I'm very grateful for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey, and obviously none of us are perfect. I'm 54 now, still got a lot of things to learn. And you ever notice, maybe you've had this happen recently, I've had it happen recently, you learn something or something finally connects with you and you go, how did it take me 54 years to figure this out? Like, I should have known this at 22, not at 54. But that's great because we're always learning new things.
Absolutely. Hey, Chris, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. This was wonderful. I loved reconnecting with you. It's been way too long since you and I hung out and talked. I don't want there to be this amount of time between our next conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll find something to do together.
Wonderful.